Well, I have just about got my breath back after one of the greatest days in Six Nations history last Saturday. Scotland smashed France, Italy upset England, while on Friday night Ireland got the win they needed against Wales to take us down to what will be an unbelievable Super Saturday this coming weekend. Will Slattery here with you. Welcome to the Left Wing Podcast, and today we're going to try to make sense of what has been a crazy tournament, a crazy weekend just gone, and what promises to be a crazy weekend upcoming. Luke Fitzgerald is here with me as well. Luke, how are things?
Good, Will. How are you?
I'm doing great. Cian Tracey's with us here as well. Cian, how are you?
Similarly buzzing, Will. It was obviously a brilliant day on Saturday, but selfishly, I enjoyed it even more because the Ireland game was out of the way on Friday night, cleared the decks to sit in the couch all day on Saturday, which hasn't kind of worked out for, I know Ireland played France on the Thursday, but a lot of the games, have kind of clashed, so it meant that you've had to watch them back. So it was a joy to sit and watch those two games back to back.
I know, it was an unbelievable Saturday. We'll get into all that now. But first, our rugby coverage in the left wing is sponsored by Energia. Energia sponsors rugby in Ireland at all levels, at grassroots with the Energia AIL, and is official energy partner to Leinster, Connacht and the Irish men's and women's teams. To learn more about Energia's rugby partnerships and find out about their exclusive home energy offer for rugby fans, you can visit energia.ie/rugby. Luke, what an unbelievable Saturday that was. Scotland 50, France 40. We'll kick off with that. Very misleading scoreline in some ways. It was 47-14, like deep into the second half, and France obviously scored a couple of late tries, which will be potentially significant by picking up that try bonus point. But to be fair, when we were discussing this game last week, we had a big kind of chat about Scotland and France and where they're both at. And you did flag, France potentially having maybe a blooper in them, but also like that the style of play, like getting into this kind of like open, loose game against Scotland could potentially prove a big mistake, and so it played out. Like what did you make of how that game unfolded? To Scotland scoring 40 points unanswered to open up that huge lead that ultimately proved so decisive.
God, I absolutely loved it. Like, it was a great spectacle, first and foremost. Some brilliant tries, some brilliant individual skill at times as well. And it was kind of just breathless, wasn't it? I think that's the kind of game that really suits Scotland. They've got some really good athletes. They've got some very creative players. They've got a very dangerous backline with lots of serious athletes in there. And I did feel that, like, look, to me, I still would have leaned towards France if it kind of, if that kind of game unfolded. I just thought maybe, is it wise to get into that with Bielbury on the other side of the pitch and Dupont just kind of picking you apart? I'm never sure that that's a good idea to get into a firefight with France in that department. Maybe South Africa, probably the only team you kind of say, oh, they could probably live with them for just danger men in the back line. But it still plays to kind of Scotland's strengths, and I thought it might be close on that basis. I absolutely, as much as I would love to take some credit, I did not see it unfolding as it did. And they fed off the energy of the crowd. They had some very creative kind of backline plays. They picked the French team apart. I thought that Stain try off the back of the line, it was a lovely bit of play. Unusual for Dupont to miss a tackle. I was on Twitter, and I literally, just before the ripped play. Now, we obviously know subsequently that the rip at the time looked like it was a knock on and looked like he had a knee on the ground, so probably couldn't have been attacking the ball. But leaving all that aside, still unbelievable by Dupont to get that ball out of there. I mean, that's Tuipulotu who he ripped the ball off. But I just tweeted out, is there anything that Dupont can't do? And I just as literally the next play, he misses the tackle on Stain. And I actually was in the middle of replying. I was like, can you actually reply to yourself on Twitter? Is that a bit like smelling your own farts type of thing? And I had a joke kind of written out to, well, one thing is maybe, can't tackle Stain, but in fairness, someone got in there just afterwards and pulled me up on it. Look, it was a great day, really great day for Scottish rugby. I think it's one of their best performances they've delivered. I will say, with the caveat, it still had a bit of a Scottish tilt on it with the second amount of tries they let in at the end, and it kind of goes outside of their control now with conceding the bonus point. It had a little Scottish tilt on it at the end, but magnificent performance, and it really, really teased things up for this week in the Aviva to see if they can get over the hump from their perspective. I do think Ireland are, and we'll get into this, I'm sure, but Ireland are better suited to controlling Scotland, I think, a little bit. They're more structured than France, I think, particularly in open play, and probably a little stingier generally if they're playing well. Mistakes wise, you probably won't cough up as much, or they probably deliver a bit more, I think. France they just have that incredible talent and flair, which Ireland will never have. But I think Ireland just have that little bit more structure, and I think they'll be able to control the game, or they'll want to control the game more rather than letting it get out of hand. So difficult one for Scotland, I think, to deliver again after all the energy they expended. But I cannot wait for this weekend. And it was such a good day in Murrayfield. Like, what a day. My next door neighbour's Scottish. I mean, he deserved that one. He's had a few tough days out. Feckin got the text straight afterwards from him looking for a bloody ticket, of course. But what a day it's set up for. Can't wait for the weekend now.
Absolutely, yeah. An absolutely unbelievable Scottish performance, especially on the attacking side of the ball. It's funny, you mentioned the way they conceded the tries at the end. When I was watching back the highlights, when Finn Russell kicked a penalty, I think it was to go 50-26 up with 2.5 minutes to go, and they somehow conceded 2 tries in 2.5 minutes. I don't even know if that's humanly possible, but I think, to be fair, Scotland I kind of pitched their tent at that stage, and we're happy to finish the game. Cian, what did you make of how things unfolded? Like, I'm kind of torn between two different narratives. One, like, Scotland, when they play like that, they are such a joy to watch. Again, it hammers home their frustrating inconsistency with the Italian performance. And then I also look at France and said, what happened to France? Like, they came in with the Grand Slam in their grasp, kind of similar to England last year, but this was worse than England last year. Like, the England game last year, they kind of butchered a lot of chances. This time they were just completely blown away. Like, they conceded 40 points unanswered, and their defence had been so stout up to now. I know they played, say, Ireland, Wales and Italy, so maybe it wasn't as tough a test as Scotland, obviously, who, as Luke mentioned, have such lethal attackers. But I don't know, which way do you lean on it? For me, I'm kind of still baffled by how France were so badly beaten, considering the form they've shown, the strength and depth they have. They seemed hungry, primed, everything seemed to be in their favour, and they were absolutely walloped.
You just never know which French team are going to turn up, do you?
Classic.
Away from home. From home, definitely, yeah.
The tired old cliche, but just when you sort of thought that France might have shaken that sort of tag off, and that was always my fear with them in terms of going for this Grand Slam. I did think they were a Grand Slam winning team, but they just took their eye off the ball, and I think they fell in love with themselves a little bit. I think Luke is spot on. They played into Scotland's hands, and there's a lesson in this from an Irish point of view for this weekend. And I think, like, Luke is right to praise the Scottish backline, and we know what they're capable of when they get good, clean ball. Like, Finn Russell is playing the rugby of his life. Kyle Steyn on the wing was absolutely brilliant. But I actually thought this game was more about the Scottish pack, because that has been their Achilles heel for so long. It's been the main reason why Ireland have had the hoodoo over them, is that they tend to get on top of them up front. And I thought the pack were immense here. I thought it was a ballsy selection to keep Xander Fagerson on the bench and then bring him on just before half time. There was a bit of sort of Rassie Erasmus and South African about that. I thought the back row of Matt Fagerson, Rory Darge, and in particular Jack Dempsey were absolutely immense, and these are guys who Ireland have tend to gotten the better of, and we've been, myself included, raving about this French pack. I wonder if they had their time over again, would they have started Miafu to try and bring a bit more bulk to that second row, and try and put the squeeze on them up front, because I think that's how you kill Scotland. And as soon as they get their tails up, particularly at home at Murrayfield, which the atmosphere looked like it was incredible, they were obviously hard to stop. Now, their victory came at a big cost, lads. Like, they lost Gregor Brown and Scott Cummings, their two starting second rows, which I think they are huge losses coming to Ireland this weekend for all the reasons I've just outlined, because I think Ireland won't be as loose as France were, and I think Ireland will try and put the squeeze on them up front. Obviously, we'll get on and talk about Ireland's performance against Wales, but I think there's lessons in how they did or perhaps didn't go about taking Wales apart when they look at Scotland this weekend. But for France, it is a massive, massive failure on Galthier's part once again. You look at the quality of players that they have at their disposal, and like I said, I thought this team had Grand Slam written all over them, and that they failed at the penultimate hurdle, and now their title is in danger as well. Because look, I know England are at a particularly low ebb at the moment, but they've got their backs against the wall. going to Paris, and I wouldn't be surprised if they put in a performance to finish on a high. And again, like, Paris is brilliant when France have their tails up, but if it's nervy open on the opening exchange, lads, it could be a very, very interesting night. And I just think Galthié once again has under-delivered with this star-studded team.
Yeah, and it's funny, France have won the Six Nations by beating England at home, I think on 3 occasions, 04, 2010 and 2022. And even though they were huge favourites on all 3 occasions, all 3 times it was actually pretty close. It wasn't like France, you might think the big response, they blow them away. But all 3 times on those 3 occasions, they actually had to dig it out. And I think I agree, even though England are in a low ebb, and we'll touch on them in a little bit, I agree with you. I think it could be sticky for them potentially on Saturday. I'm glad you mentioned the 2 second rows who were injured, because I think Gregor Brown has been brilliant for them. It's funny, when he was called up by Andy Farrell on the Lions tour, like, I watch a lot of rugby. I must confess, I wasn't familiar with them. I hadn't, I've seen Glasgow a million times. I was like, has he slipped through the cracks for me? But this season, since then, I've been really impressed with him. He's really big and physical. Was playing very well on Saturday as well before he got injured. So he's a huge loss. Luke, what's your view on France after another disappointing result? Obviously, they could still go on and win the championship. You still get the same trophy whether you win a Grand Slam or not. But it would feel like a massive underachievement. I agree with Cian. Like, Galthié's team just seems to have a blooper in them almost. You mentioned it, like, seem to have a bad blooper in them as well. Like, what's your verdict on where they're at, even if they go on to win the championship? It's still kind of a very bad day for this group as they're building towards a World Cup in 18 months' time.
Yeah, it is, and I think some of the selection things, I thought, it's an interesting point that Cian made about Mahaffey, because if you saw the difference he made when he came on, now, look, albeit the Scottish bodies were probably pretty weary at that stage, but you saw the impact he had when he came on. And you just wonder, when you think of, to me, it's kind of France and South Africa are kind of out on their own in terms of quality, depth, where their games are at locally, etc., right? And you just see the difference in the mentality between both coaching staffs when they see an advantage that they have on the pitch, right? So to me, when I'm looking at, look at what South Africa did to Ireland. Like, that, they could have been out of sight if they actually probably decided to play some rugby. But to be honest with you, they were never ever going to lose that game against Ireland, right? And they focused, however boring it was and awful it was in the eye to watch them scrum all day against Ireland, right? That to me was an unbelievable coach. Like, they could have been a little bit more expansive, right? But for the most part, I loved it because they just saw an advantage that they had, and they pressed and they pressed and they pressed on the advantage till it broke Ireland. And the scoreline didn't reflect it, but it was a complete domination, right? France, to me, like, if you were coming up, if you watch, like, so to me, I would have been watching Ireland-Scotland games for the last couple of years and going, well, what are they doing against Scotland that really, how are they beating Scotland out of sight nearly all the time? And to me, that would have been what I would have been looking at. And could we deliver something close to that as a French coach? And of course they could have. And to me, that was going to be always squeeze the life out of them in the pack. Get your big, heavy guys in there. You've got a brilliant kicker in Ramos, so you can build a lead, and then you can become expansive. But to me, press the advantage that you have, the clear advantage. To me, the backlines were quite well matched in terms of physical, athletes and just physicality. Obviously, you've got Dupont, who's just special, but just leaving it, like, everything from 10 outside, pretty evenly matched as a kind of, just when you come, like, pure firepower will. And to me, getting into that with Scotland was never going to be that wise. And, having a very open, expansive game, yes, it could work for you with Bielbury, and he is a star. But everything else, to me, is pretty evenly matched, except in the pack. Like, find ways to press that advantage, whether that's going to touch all the time, whether it's, another scrum or whatever it is, break them down mentally there. Hang on to the ball for large periods. If you hang on to the ball for long periods against Scotland, they give away pens. They always have. They have a loose element in them. They always have a few fetchers in their team. If you can be really tight and you ruck really well, to me, that was the way to beat Scotland. And I would have pressed home that advantage no matter how boring it looked on paper. And I just think that I think it's important Cian mentions Galthié, because I think that does fall on him. I think it does. I think as a coach, sometimes away from home, sometimes you just got to find the thing that you can press home when you're in trouble, when the crowd has got their back up, when Scotland have scored a few tries. You go, okay, lads, hang on, let's take a breath there. Let's simplify this thing back to where have we got an advantage over them. And that sounds like a really simple way of thinking about rugby, but that's always how I've thought about rugby. And I think that's how the best teams always think about it, and the best coaches. So I think it's an important point to make about France. And I think it's something that they'll have to think about, because there's no doubt they've got the quality. There's no doubt they've got the depth. But they don't just have the depth out wide in the kind of magical positions. They've got the depth in the pack too. So that means you can play two ways. And you've got to be able to play two ways against some teams rather than getting into these firefights every week where, yes, you have serious firepower and you might more often than not come out on top. But they should be coming out on top of all these teams in the Six Nations, in my opinion. I think they're better than all the teams. And they've got enough firepower and enough quality. And they've got all the tools. They've got the kicker. They've got all these things. They've got the magical players. They've got the weight, the power. They should be able to beat every team every week, even if it's away from home. So you shouldn't have these massive swings in performance with them. So the coaching staff have something to definitely get their head around, and try and figure out how they get the consistency in this team, because I do think this was a Grand Slam winning team. I agree with you.
Yeah, back-to-back Grand Slam winning teams, in my view. And like I agree with your point. Like, for all the talk about a team's depth, you can still only pick 15 players on the pitch, and you can only have 23 in your squad. So it's how you deploy it, how you use it, how you decide to play week on week. As you say, France have the versatility that they can play, a basketball up and down kind of game, but they also have the firepower that they can play to squeeze the life out of you, kind of South African style as well. And as you say, which team has had the most success against Scotland in World Rugby? Ireland. And they haven't taken them on in these really high scoring end-to-end games necessarily. Now, Ireland have played some good rugby on occasions, but that hasn't been the foundation. So yeah, that's an interesting point. And be interested to see what he picks against England this weekend. Obviously, does he try to still play the exact same way they did at the weekend? Does he rotate? Does he make changes? That'll be fascinating.
You've got to go after England's defence, guys, out wide, haven't you?
Yeah, and like
they don't have to change this week. I don't know what you think, Ian.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think it's like you're spot on, Will, in the point that you make that they can play both types of games, and I think there's an element of horses for courses. Whereas France's scrum wouldn't be, weirdly enough, France's scrum wouldn't be a major strength of theirs at the moment, and England's scrum would be. So I completely agree with Luke. I think this is the weekend where you do have Guillard and an Olivon in the second row, that you can play that more kind of fast, expansive game, because the amount of chances that England have been throwing up, I think that they will punish them. So the fact that they have both weapons to use, I think they need to cut their cloth accordingly, and that's what they didn't do last weekend. Yep,
yeah, I agree with that. We'll circle back to England later in the show, England, Italy, and maybe touch on some of the other talking points as we look forward to the weekend. But I want to go to Ireland now, obviously. Luke, 27-17 win over Wales on Friday night, got the bonus point win in the end. Early try from Jacob Stockdale. Ireland were playing really well at that stage. It looked like a perfect continuation of their Twickenham form. Then they had a second try rolled out at that stage, still looking really good. And then after that, Wales, to be fair, battled back into the game, defended really well, kind of some clever kicking game by the Welsh, and just basically generally fronted up and played, I thought, a really good game. And Ireland kind of struggled for periods, ended up getting a 10-point victory, which keeps their championship hopes alive. What jumped out to you about how Ireland played on Friday?
I thought it was gritty. I didn't think it was as pretty on the eye. I thought they went a little bit away from some of the great interplay with the forwards that, I go on and on about this Irish team as being a real differentiator for them. I didn't see that tip-on pass. I thought they fell in love a little bit with going out the back, which isn't always as effective if a defence is kind of, having a good day. And Wales did have a great day. I thought they fronted up so well defensively. I really do think, like, Ireland did try and batter them, and they got there in the end. And I think it's important to say that. But I did feel like they could have been a little bit more direct at times. I thought this team sometimes has a tendency to, if they have the ball for long periods, to continue to go out the backwards. Really, I feel like the real threat for them is when they are getting that link play from the forward to forward, and not just kind of, having that kind of forward battering ram heading back in towards the second and third defender. That kind of inwards angle. I think when they're at their best, when they've got that outwards angle and they're kind of committing defenders and making, forward on forward. I think this team can actually pick apart forward defenders quite well. They've got some good athletes with good footwork, and they've got some beautiful hands. And I think when they're at their best, they're using that, that kind of front door option. Just for the audience, I think that they're using that other forward rather than going to the 10 or the back out the back a lot, which I think they can fall in love with that. I also thought that the initial pressure and kind of the way they broke the Welsh down initially probably didn't help, because it felt like they were going to continue to go back to that rather than maybe deploying more of a kicking game at times and territory. I didn't think they exerted a huge amount of pressure at times from the kicking game. They also didn't get as much pay. I thought Wales defended it actually very well as well. So there's two parts to that. Because if you think about England, And the reason that looks so easy on the eye, I do think we got a huge amount of turnover in the air against England. And all of a sudden, the English defence is backpedaling. They're unorganised. We had a lot more of those opportunities against Wales or against England than we got against Wales and France as well, to a certain extent. So that was probably why it didn't look as easy on the eye, Will. But look, I thought there was lots of pleasing aspects. I thought how they stuck to the job. I thought how they got the bonus point that was important. So all those things were good, and there was plenty to be pleased about, but also a bit to maybe refocus the minds on probably why it went well at Twickenham, and maybe how they get a bit more play in the air, how they're a bit more effective with the kicking game, but also why they were able to break England down, like, who are a decent defense. They're okay defensively in the tight, to be honest with you, but Ireland broke them down their loads there. And when Ireland are at their best, they're breaking teams down in that area rather than out wide. I think they earned, when they're playing well, they earn the right to go around teams. And I didn't think they did that as well against Wales. And they'll need to do that against Scotland. They'll need to take them on in the tight exchanges first and break them in there, which is what they always do generally if they beat Scotland, and they have for a long period of time. They get they squeeze them out of it in those areas, and they're really accurate at ruck time. And the forwards are generally, as you mentioned earlier on, really, really influential in that, not just at set piece, but in the open phases of the game. I think Ireland's forwards are usually, they have an edge on the Scottish team, or have had for a long period of time in those places. So to me, it was a nice refocus on what's important for the team to look good on the attack side of the game. Thought defensively they could have been a little bit stingier. And then the other big talking point is clearly, the kicking from the deck. Look, I do think what you get from Crowley, and you heard me talk about this before the tournament starts, let's just start by being a stingy team to attack against. And Crowley's great for that. It's make yourself hard to beat. I also think he's been great on the attacking side of the ball, but the last piece of the puzzle for him, and he's definitely the guy I'd be picking, by the way, off the back of the tournament, even with the kicking woes, he does need to get it sorted out. I thought Andy Dunn had some lovely parts. I know we don't generally like to mention our competitors, but he had some really interesting thoughts about, how he was kind of the different amount of time he was spending over kicks, and how that kind of builds pressure and doesn't build a kind of consistency of thought. That's something maybe to think about. I thought Raj had a very interesting piece in the Examiner on some of the kicking. I don't know if you saw that, Cian. So there's lots of interesting people that I hope he's, reaching out to maybe, I don't know, get a kicking session in or have a think about it, or as Raj said, maybe he just has to, get his own head clear on how he's approaching it, because it's a big problem. Like, if you look at, like, one of the best things about Scotland is that, Finn Russell's kicking percentages have been pretty consistent over the last couple of years. He looks like he's going to get the kicks, doesn't he? Ramos, you think about him, he looks like he's going to get the kicks. Generally South Africa, the only time they come into trouble when they don't pick a place kicker. It's so bloody important to get it right. So he's the right guy for Ireland on a number of fronts. But the last frontier for him, I think, is probably is to get the kicking right, because he looks so polished outside of that. I've been really pleased with how Jack Crowley's been playing. I think he's definitely, to me, at the moment, head and shoulders above everyone else in that 10 slot, which we didn't know before the tournament. That's what we were asking for in that position. But the kicking will be his Achilles heel if he doesn't get it sorted.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see it fall out, because I tweeted about his kicking on Friday night, and I got a lot of people responding, kind of blaming Johnny Sexton for his kicking, his misses, and I feel like it predates Sexton's involvement with the squad for sure. But there's been a few this season. It's funny because even there's been different theories. No matter the theory, he should not be missing that conversion in front of the post. There's no explanation. That just needs to go over 100 times out of 100. Technique where you're putting the ball in the tee, none of that should matter. Any international kicker should be nailing that 100 times out of 100. And even the conversion he missed in the first half after his own try was a poor attempt. It wasn't an easy kick at all, but it was just the way he struck it wasn't great. Cian, anything you want to come in on from what Luke said? I suppose a lot of people have been pointing out about just a lack of an attacking kicking game, and even the numbers are quite stark in that regard. Crowley only kicked the ball 3 times and he carried the ball 10 times. That's not a balance you really want from your out half. I'm sure the previous week in Twickenham he kicked it 10 times and carried it 7 times, so that was a little more, I suppose, balanced in terms of playing the territorial game as well. Anything you want to add to what Luke said or jumped out to you?
Yeah, I know I've seen that Crowley's gotten a bit of criticism for the lack of game management, but I actually think a lot of this comes back to Gibson Park as well. Ireland have changed their style of play in terms of what the play mostly goes through 9 now as opposed to 10. When Johnny Sexton was playing, it mostly went through him. But since he's retired, Jamison Gibson-Park is the main man in that Irish backline. And we saw that at Twickenham. And when it went well, he got loads of credit, and Crowley outside of him facilitated really well. And I didn't think Gibson-Park had his best game at all on Friday night. He got blocked down partially for a couple of box kicks early on. I don't know if that got into his head. I didn't think he had a bad game, but I think a lot of the responsibility in terms of the game management and the kicking does fall on the scrum half with the way Ireland have been playing. Sure, the goal kicking is a completely separate thing, and that's something Jack Crowley is going to have to get sorted out. I mean, I think back to the Cass game, Munster Cass game in January, and he got timed out for either a conversion or a penalty. I think it was a conversion. Like, that kind of stuff can't happen. And he lets the shot clock run really close to the wire. It's the manner of the misses. He doesn't seem to be striking them well. His kicking to touch, he seems to be quite conservative with that.
I was poor on Friday night, Keane, wasn't there? Was a couple of penalties. There was one that was on like the 10-metre line and he barely got it into 22. Like that was actually, that was very disappointing as well, actually.
And I wonder, like, the kick, obviously, to the kick dead against Italy, which potentially cost Ireland what could be a crucial bonus point. I wonder if that's in his head and he's gone, I'm just going to be a little bit more conservative before I build my confidence back up. But he's got to strike the ball better, and that's definitely an issue he's going to have to work on. But I think by and large, I agree with Luke. I think he did well. He took his try very well. I think the out half debate has been settled for now. But it's a big game for him this weekend, going up against Finn Russell, who's arguably the best 10 in the world right now. And his development over the last couple of years has been brilliant, really, to watch. But on the whole, I think Ireland, it was always going to be, nearly impossible to build on the Twickenham win, because it was such an emotional high. To come back down, and you know this better than the two of us, Luke, to come back down and bring yourself back up for a home game against Wales where you're raging hot favourites. No matter what way you dress it up, these players are human at the end of the day, and I think it was always going to be hard to reach those peaks. And I think if Jack Conan's try hadn't been disallowed, and it was completely fair that it wasn't, it was a knock-on by Tom O'Toole, I think it could have been a very different game if Ireland go 14-0 up there. But I think we have to give a lot of credit to Wales. Like, that was Wales' best performance in quite some time. And like if a team rocks up to Dublin and plays very well, and Ireland, let's not forget, had made 5 changes again to their team, they're still missing a lot of guys. That has to be taken into context for getting a bonus point win. It's not always going to be pretty. Like, we just spoke about France there in terms of how they completely took their eye off the ball. Well, Ireland didn't do that. They had to grind it out. And I think in the long run, that'll be far more beneficial. You had a guy like Tom O'Toole starting his first game at Loosehead, who did very, very well, won 2 scrum penalties. Nick Timoney starting his first game, a Six Nations game, in the back row. You've lots of different guys getting new experiences, guys off the bench, and I think that is a real positive as well, by giving Wales their credit for how much they pushed Ireland.
Yeah, I agree with you completely, Cian. Like Andy Farrell's comments after the game, he was quick to say, that was a proper test match, and talk up Wales. And oftentimes when coaches say that, you're on a roll in your eyes and you think you're just spinning. I actually 100% agreed with them. I thought Wales were really, really good. Like, if you compare their performance on Friday with how they played in Twickenham, like, Twickenham was one of the worst performances I've seen from any team in the Six Nations ever. I just thought, defensively they were awful. Their discipline that day was atrocious. Their execution was rubbish. Like, Dewi Lake didn't tap a 5-metre penalty. Compare that to how much they've improved for Friday night. Like Luke mentioned, their defence, I thought they defended brilliantly. Like, they were, and like, maybe Ireland in some instances didn't make it too difficult in terms of deciphering what Ireland were doing, but they were smashing the Irish ball carriers. It actually reminded me of the Sean Edwards era. I'm watching Irish ball carriers just run into brick wall after brick wall. And even the way they managed McCluskey, like, McCluskey gained some yardage, but they were very quick to clamp down on his arms to ensure he couldn't get any offloads, which has been a real source of go forward for Ireland. So I actually came away from that. Say, compare and contrast Ireland versus Italy and Ireland versus Wales, similar score lines. I actually thought Ireland were a lot better against Wales. Like, didn't have as many mistakes. I thought the Italian performance, I was very disappointed with how Ireland I thought they made a lot of errors. Whereas on this occasion, I actually came away kind of with a little more respect for Wales. Not saying Ireland couldn't have done different things. We've touched on a few things there, but for me, I actually was just very impressed with Wales. Luke, I don't know, you were going to come in there maybe.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point you make, because we thinking about having the conversation with the local shopkeeper about the game, and we were talking about it, and I was just saying, we kind of seem to get drawn into this game against Wales sometimes, where it can be very much kind of one out runners, where our runners are kind of heading back in towards where their numbers are, and it's almost like it's like they're really compelling test matches to watch, but they're kind of tight and cagey, and it's really, really. I thought that was a seriously physical test match. I think if you put them in that position, for whatever reason, like maybe it's like us in Scotland to a certain extent at the moment, where they just seem to get up for the Irish match. They seem to cause us trouble. They seem to, they always have a fetcher or two in the pitch who seems to have a big day, with a couple of turnovers, and their tackling seems to go up a level. And I think once we didn't get some pay initially, that point that Cian made about the try, I think was a really good one. I suppose I made it myself as well. Was that I did think we kind of lost our way a little bit. They gained a little bit of heart, and we didn't get like full. You could tell we were in control of the match. We didn't get full control of it back, and then they get that kind of weird try. A prop scoring from kind of 30 out, and you just get these kind of weird things that the game was all of a sudden in the balance. That it was a little bit closer than it probably should have been. But I think the point about the changes as well. Look, really valuable to get those guys in, and I think what we might look back on this Six Nations, regardless of the result on the weekend, is that we've been talking about depth for a long time with this team. I think all of a sudden we have a bit of depth, and I think there's been some serious value in that. I think we'll have a few of those games where you kind of say to yourself, that didn't look that fluid on the eye, but there's probably a good reason for that. I think we'll probably have discovered, like, I think I'm very clear now when I watch Ireland about where they will be successful in terms of how they play. How they'll make themselves successful in terms of how they play. I think, look, the scrum is still an issue that they've got to get resolved. I think there's still too many penalties being given away there. They need to fix that for World Cup 100%. Line-out looks better to me. And I think the open play, I won't go on about it again, but I think the interplay with the forwards is the future for the team. It's still it's the past, present, and future for the team. I still think that's a point of difference for Ireland, is that they've got some really, really nice ball players, some really good athletes in that back row and across the front row too, that you need to utilize that skill versus other teams. And when we play well, we need to be using those guys better. That's a resource that we have that other teams don't have. You heard me talk about it with France. You heard me talking about, find something that you're good at. We're really good at that. We don't need to keep going out the back to our ball players. And also, we've got a bit of depth now in the centres. I think McCluskey, yes, you love him. He was a little bit younger, but he is key. I know they managed him well in the weekend, but he still was a guy that was breaking tackles and getting through and causing upset. Balakoon still looked very dangerous whenever he got any opportunities. We've still got Hansen, we've got Keenan, we've got obviously Lowe to come back into the mix. We have Stockdale look pretty good in the weekend as well. So I don't know. I'm actually a little bit bullish on Ireland. I think I'd love a little bit of depth, maybe that second centre role. I'd love a little bit more clarity about who comes in after Ringrose there. But I'm feeling way better about Ireland. I'm feeling way better about some of the depth in the pack. Some of the guys, like you got Baird, you got Izuchuku to come back in, you've got Porter, you've got McCarthy to come back into that front row. And all of a sudden I'm kind of thinking, do you know what? We're not in that bad shape, and I can see how this Irish team will be successful going forward. Now, delivering it, you still got to deliver. But I don't know. I'm liking where Ireland are at. And I thought it was a really tough test match. And I think he was right to say that and give Wales credit, because they fronted up. It could have been a different day for them if we got that try earlier on, I think. But we didn't. And it was a tight match, and it was very valuable.
Yeah, and then Scotland will provide another great test off the back of their win in Murrayfield. Two last things before we kind of look ahead towards the team selection. Cian mentioned Jamison Gibson Park. People might remember he threw that intercept right on the Welsh line, and to Alex Mann, I think, came out of the line. It actually gave me flashbacks to a moment I hadn't thought of in years, but I just wanted to mention Leinster-Toulouse Champions Cup final in Spurs Stadium. Leinster were queuing up for a try, and the exact same thing happened. One of the Toulouse players jumped the line, obviously knows that Gibson Park likes to throw those long skips and put a guy over. Just remind me, I hadn't thought of that moment in a long time. That was a real key moment in that game. It was in the second half at the time. I just wanted to mention that. Also, Rhys Carey, Luke mentioned him there. Like, what a great moment for the tournament. Not for maybe Robert Balakoon watching back as the tight head prop kind of, or the prop saunters by him, but the slow motion replay of him just smiling ear to ear as he's sprinting towards the line is just like a great Six Nations moment on what was a great Six Nations weekend. So,
Bill, can I just jump in on that? We were just before we were recording the post-match podcast, for some reason the Welsh media did their kind of mix zone in the media area, which would normally be basically down by the tunnel, not to go into the details. So before we started recording, Rhys Carey walked in and he was waiting for Alex Mann to finish his interview. So he was just kind of standing next to us. So I just said, fair play, that was some try. And he kind of turned around and he was like, That's what I'm paid to do, isn't it? I have to say,
I'm glad you didn't go. Everyone who does the Welsh accent goes Jamaican. You were on the edge.
I was teetering on the edge.
It was a good effort.
Yeah, that was decent.
We ended up having like this kind of just a minute or two chat with him, and he seemed like such a nice fella and was kind of like self-deprecating as well. But that was like, it was a horrible moment from an Irish point of view, but an absolutely sensational moment for a prop. And he was quite humble about it, to be fair. And yeah, it was just a nice kind of moment just before we were going to record the podcast at the weekend that I mentioned.
I mean this in the most or the least offensive way possible. Have you ever seen a video of a hippo like running in the wild? They're unbelievably fast. Like they actually run like as fast as like a cheetah when they're at full speed or as close to it. Like he was motoring, and he was actually sent home by Warren Gatlin, I think, in 2023 from Welsh camp for not being fit enough. And he's clearly, look, he's a big guy, very fleet-footed. And I think he scored in 3 games in a row. And they have Italy this Saturday as well, which, you know, I mentioned last week, I didn't think Wales could beat Ireland, but I thought if they could kind of harness the momentum of the Scotland near miss and come out of the Aviva with their kind of momentum intact, which I definitely think they did, they'll have a great chance this Saturday.
Well, can Italy deliver on probably being favourites 2 weeks in a row?
Yeah.
That would be huge. Sorry, as much as Wales need a win, it would be brilliant for international rugby if Wales, like, because I mean, sorry, we're going to get on to obviously the Italian stuff, but huge, like, I mean, if they can deliver.
No, that even though there's no title contention on the line, it's a nice little kind of break between the two kind of title contending games for that one. We'll be back after the break with more chat. Okay, guys, before we get to that Italy-England game and some of those storylines, just quick some selection issues, Cian, for this weekend. Like, I suppose there's 2 areas I'm looking at. I think the rest of the team looks pretty settled to me. The left wing and maybe the back 5 and how Andy Farrell kind of rearranges the back row and the second rows along with it. Well, maybe quickly on the left wing, do you think Jacob Stockdale did enough to start on Saturday, or do you reckon Tommy O'Brien comes in after that great performance at Twickenham?
I thought Stockdale did well. I think it was very clever man management by Andy Farrell to give him another opportunity after Paris. And I think he did enough to suggest that he's very much still in the mix going forward. Now, all that said, I thought Tommy O'Brien was desperately unlucky not to play due to how well he did off the bench. And I would imagine that was a tough conversation that Andy Farrell had to have. Now, I know Stockdale is more of a like-for-like replacement for James Lowe. Left wing is his natural position. But I go back to how well Tommy O'Brien did at Twickenham and how well he linked with Robert Balakoon and the different kind of cutting edge that gave Ireland. And I would love to see that again. I think another factor that could play into Tommy O'Brien's hands is that he is a better defender than Jacob Stockdale. And if he's going to be up against Darcy Graham at the weekend, who was electric last weekend against France, I think Farrell might want the defensive solidity of Tommy O'Brien and with the attacking threats that he's going to give you going forward. So I think that's going to be a very, very tight call. But if you're asking me now, I would probably edge towards Tommy O'Brien. I don't know what you think, Luke.
Yeah, I like Tommy O'Brien for it. I was really pleased for Stockdale because that would have been a tough way to go out against France, and I think his form has been good. So I agree on the man management. I thought that was sensible, and it was pleasing on the eye to see him. I was really happy to, because I mean, look, I've been critical of parts of Stockdale's game over the years, and then he's obviously had all those injury concerns. You know, he's just had a tough period, so it was pleasing to see him back in. Delighted for that. And it's good for Ireland too. So yeah, look, but I think it probably does come down to maybe that defensive side of the game. Although, look, Tommy O'Brien wasn't perfect against England. The last time he was in on the defensive side, that was he got back and made a great try saver for that. You know, everyone was talking about the Balakoon cover, and that was correct. But Tommy O'Brien was a great recovery, but it was poor defense before that. So he still has a bit of tidying up to do on that side of it as well. But I mean, when it comes to commitment in the tackle, there's probably not much of comparison between himself and Stockton. I think I'd rather have that against Darcy Graham. And because, you know, you'll probably come up against Stein at different points too, whether that's covering across if he makes a break or whether that's off the blind side from kind of left to right kind of side backline moves. You probably want to have Tommy O'Brien there. I think he's better positioned. He's better footwork probably to get himself out of a bad situation, but also I think he's a bit more effective in the tackle than Stockdale currently. So that's where he edges it out for me. Although, you know, there's another side of it where you say, well, Stockdale in the air, like Tommy O'Brien's excellent in the air as well. He actually might be better than Stockdale, but Stockdale has that size against Darcy Graham. You go, that might be nice to have. And he was effective in the air against Wales on, you know, one or two occasions, but O'Brien was brilliant against England there. He cleaned them out in the air. So that's a tight call on that one. But for me, I'd be leaning towards Tommy O'Brien, I think.
Luke, what did you think? Like, so I wonder, does the management see Tommy O'Brien as a left wing? He obviously came on in that position because Lowe got injured, but I don't suspect he was there to cover that, really. I think it was probably one of the other positions he might have come off the bench for had Lowe not got injured. Yeah. Like, does the notion of Stockdale being a left footer, kind of, as Cian says, more of a like for like replacement, even though I agree with you, it would be a disappointment for me for O'Brien to play so well at Twickenham and then kind of not get to build on that linking up with Balakoon kind of element. But I'm just curious what the management might think, and if they think, well, actually, Tommy, is he actually a left wing? Is that actually a position is that really his position? Albeit he showed at Twickenham he can do it. But
well, how difficult? Like, it's a good question. It's a good point, Will. Like, how difficult, Luke, would it be for Tommy O'Brien? Obviously, we saw him doing it off the bench, but he is a right winger. How difficult would it be for him to go on the left? Obviously, the left-footed kicking option aside.
But that is a tricky part, and it's a really nice tool to have, particularly if you're running down the touch. You see the amount of guys that get kind of put into touch. Being like, so if you're a left winger and left footed, you're right winger, right footed, it is a lovely skill to have, or a lovely get out of jail card to have, to be able to put a grubber down or chip over when you're under pressure, when the covering defense is coming across. It's kind of valuable. I won't underplay that. That is a valuable skill to have. And I think if you're I used to try and develop that, because and you can always go to a grubber. Like, I'm amazed how many people don't like go to a chip versus a grubber. To me, you should be able to, grubber with both feet pretty well. That's a skill. That's an easy enough skill to learn. So that's just a technical point on the switch between the two. Yeah, look, you can be more exposed, I think, a little bit on the left wing to a certain extent, because you don't always get the 9 covering in off scrum. That's the only real situation I can see where there's an actual difference between both wings. And also, it's kind of it's a little bit of a different place to chase kicks from your 9, because the 9 is unsighted versus if you're on the right wing, he can see you and it's easier to time the run. But very, very, like, not big issues as far as I can see. The only one is off scrum set piece, but importantly, that could be key against Scotland if you're not used to the position, because Scotland actually had some lovely backline play, I thought, against France. So that might be something that they do consider, because remember, you lose the 9 off the scrum on the left if you're defending on the left wing. Now, sometimes the 9 will come in and plug in, but generally what you want your 9 to do is to shut off the right side of the pitch and stay high and kind of cut off any opportunities there for the Scottish team to go left off their scrum. Whereas if you go right, you kind of lose a guy, you lose the 9, and it's nice to have him in that pocket inside your 10. But that's the only real difference, guys, to be honest with you. And I think it's small enough that I think the other factors are kind of larger, where you say defensively, I just think he's just a little bit more effective than Stockdale. Both pretty good going forward, but I think also I would still have Tommy O'Brien as having a slight edge over Stockdale there. He just looks rapid, I think, to me. I don't know about you guys, but O'Brien just... Stockdale's quick when he gets going, but does he have that, I don't know whether it's age or whatever it is. Maybe it's just Tommy O'Brien's a fantastic athlete. He's kind of in that Balakoon type pace for me. Like, he's an out and out speedster. I think if he's away, I don't think you're catching O'Brien. Whereas I don't know if Stockdale has that kind of top end pace anymore. It's just not the same as O'Brien.
It's hard to deny how thrilling it was watching Balakoon and Tommy O'Brien rip it up at Twickenham, wasn't it? In terms of both coming in off their wings, having that out and out pace. And it's been a while since an Irish back three has had that out and out gas on either wing. And it's fortunate how it's come about, because obviously Tommy O'Brien only ended up on the left wing because James Lowe got an injury, and I would say Lowe is more akin to Stockdale, maybe is more of a power runner down the left wing as opposed to that top end pace. So I think it worked so well that it would be a massive shame not to see it again this weekend, particularly against a Scottish backline that is rapid itself.
Yeah, I agree with you. I really like 2 of Ireland's tries came from one, O'Brien coming onto the right wing and getting an offload from Balakoon, and the other one, Balakoon going onto the left wing and putting O'Brien away. And I like the look of that for sure. So it'll be very interesting to see what way Andy Farrell goes with that at the weekend. I was going to discuss, we'll do that. Back 5, Cian. What back 5 are you picking in the pack? Like, there's been different variations, I think, pretty much in every single game. Like, you have Joe McCarthy, Tyg Byrne, James Ryan competing for second row. Obviously, Byrne can play 6 as well. Then you have Jack Conan, who was man of the match at the weekend. Caelan Doris, who's the captain, Van der Fleer, who came back in at Twickenham and played really well. Nick Timoney, who made his first Six Nations start on Friday night. So there's a load of different moving parts there. What way would you pick it if you were Andy Farrell this weekend?
He is spoiled for choice because everyone is pretty much fit. I know Izuchuku has gone back to Ulster. It's a shame we only got to see him that one time, but I'm still very excited about his potential. Yeah, absolutely spoiled for choice, Will. I think Caelan Doris stays 8. I think Josh van der Fleer comes back in at 7. I thought Nick Timoney started really well last weekend, but kind of faded out of the game a little bit. And I think he's been so good off the bench that I think he just goes back to that position because he offers you so much punch off the bench. And Josh van der Fleer was excellent at Twickenham, and he was very good, by the way, off the bench last week as well. So I'd expect him to come back. I think 6 it'd be very hard to drop Jack Conan, wouldn't it? After that performance last weekend, he was brilliant. Obviously got man of the match, didn't he? Was very, very good. It'd be hard to drop him. I just don't think Tadhg Beirne. I think Tadhg Beirne plays. I think it's just a question of whether he plays 6th or in the second row. And I think Joe McCarthy might come back into the team. I think you need Joe McCarthy's edge against this Scottish pack when they're missing their 2 second rows. Like I said, I think Ireland will need to take the game to Scotland up front. But I think James Ryan's been very good throughout the campaign as well. So I'm not sure, do you drop him to the bench? But perhaps you ask Ryan to come off the bench this weekend and have Tadhg Beirne and Joe McCarthy in the second row. But I think no matter which way he goes with it, I think it's going to be a very strong back 5. But I would expect Joe McCarthy and Josh van der Fleer to come back into the team this week.
Luke, what's your view on it? Like, for me, Conan, I think Conan has to start. I know we've a long time been fans of his on this show and thinking he deserves more starts than he gets. And after being man of the match, I just don't think he should be out of the team. I know he's a great bench option. And against Scotland and Murrayfield in 2023, when things were going haywire in terms of injuries, he actually came on in the second half and was really, really good. So I can understand the temptation to use a dynamic player like that in that role. But I'd like him there. I think I'd maybe keep Van der Fleer on the bench and put Doris at 7, potentially, and because I want Tadhg Beirne there, I want James Ryan there, I want John McCarthy there. I'm greedy. I want all these guys there. Obviously.
I want.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What? Who would you be leaving out? Who would you be putting in?
Oh God, I hate this question. This is tricky. I feel like I'm going to be like going back on everything that I've been saying about Conan for a while. I think I go back to my English selection. I think I go with. Am I doing that? Yeah, no, I am. No, I'm clear. I am. No, I look, my team would be Ryan is always in the team for me. And then it's McCarthy. I have to have Beirne for his fetching and for the line out. I'm pressing on where I think I've got advantages against Scotland. I'm going to try and squeeze them out of it. I'm going to I have enough fetching with Beirne. I have enough fetching with Van der Fleer and enough with my hooker, whoever that is. I think it's going to be obviously Cian, I'd say, back in, but I've got enough fetching in the team with him and Doris as well that I'm happy. And I've got enough power with McCarthy, with Doris, with Sheehan, with Furlong. I've got enough carry in there. I've got enough skill in there. I just like the balance. I like it for my line out. I like it for Scotland. I hate myself for I like everything about it, but I hate myself for not picking Conan. But I'm going to use him on the bench this week because I think Doris has been playing well. He's your captain. And really, the captain is the only differentiator. I can completely see where you're coming from, Will. But I think that's where I'm going this week. I think I'd like to have the power against Scotland in the last 20 to see it out. I think Ireland, I'm hoping they're leading at that point. But even if you have to get back in the game, I want the power off the bench. I like Timoney there, like that. And I really like Conan off the bench. He's so good there. Like he's a victim of his own ability on the bench for me this week.
Can I ask you a question? Who's playing better at the moment, Jack Conan or Caelan Doris?
Conan.
I think Doris has had a good tournament.
Well, he's been good.
He was great at Twickenham. He was very good at Twickenham. Up to Twickenham, he had been due a big one, I think.
Yeah, he's been due a big one.
And obviously Conan was sick at Twickenham, so he didn't get to play. So he missed that one. But
and it goes back to Luke's point that he made earlier in terms of the depth, and there was so much doom and gloom around Irish rugby. The fact that we're the big debate is which one of these world-class players is going to be on the bench is a pretty good place to be in. And I think even the S&C side of things, they deserve a lot of credit for how well they've managed. The lack of injuries throughout the Six Nations has been remarkable too.
Yeah, it's an.
What do you think? Is there any I mean, I'm using that same mentality that I have with the kind of French team for the criticism I had there about how they played against Scotland. I think Ireland, I just like that team. I just like everything about that.
And it went so well in Twickenham. You're right, Luke. It went so well.
The risk you're taking, Cian, is that you don't get the best out of Byrne. That's the one, because you have to probably keep him on the pitch for as long as possible, injury permitting. And does playing six, does it take it out? Is he able then to give you the last, whatever it is, 20, 30 that you need from him? Because you're going to need it from him. He needs a massive day in the weekend. He's crucial against Scotland, I think, for his ability to slow down the ball, line out, just the extra bit of weight that he gives you. He's a crucial piece of the puzzle for me. So I agree, he's always on the pitch for me, Cian, but I think it's 6 this week, and I just feel like I'll be able to get just enough out of him when I put him into the row for the last 20. And then I keep what I need on the bench just to see this thing out, whether that's get a try and get yourself back in the game, or to see the thing out with a bit of power. And I love Conan's accuracy at the tackle. I think it could be key, could be absolutely key at the end of the game. It sounds like a weird thing to point out, but I just feel like you might need it if Scotland are chasing. It's a close game. Conan never misses a tackle, ever. And he's got the power. If you need an extra couple of carries, he's usually pretty accurate there. Very, very few mistakes in carrying. He gets you over the gain line consistently. Good for a try. Great nose for a try for the most part. I just like him there. I hate myself for doing it.
I take your point. Even though I do think he's a great player and deserves more starts, I can understand the logic, and that's what I said. It's tempting to use him in that role because he's so good. There's probably very few players in World Rugby with that kind of impact off the bench, and as you say, Scotland having Byrne, McCarthy, and Ryan there probably makes sense as well. So yeah,
Will, just a final one on that. I think it's a bit like the Tommy O'Brien selection, because it worked so well, and I agree with Luke, it'd be very hard for the coaches to sit down this week and not go back to what worked so well at Twickenham in terms of Sheehan being back in the team, that back five that Luke has said, and Tommy O'Brien on the left wing. I mean, I know England were poor that day, but it was a record win. It was an awesome Ireland performance. Surely everything points to leaning more heavily on that.
Yep. It'll be fascinating to see what team he picks. Let's finish off with Italy-England then, and how that shapes up for this weekend. Italy 23, England 18. What an occasion in Rome. Their first ever Six Nations victory over England. First ever victory over England generally. Their fifth win under Gonzalo Quesada in the last 3 Six Nations campaigns. Their fifth win in their last 11 games, even in the Six Nations, which is, for Italy, who hadn't won very many games over the preceding 10 years, is unbelievable. Like Tommaso Menoncello, what a player. Oof. I think for probably the best 12 in the world. He's going to Toulouse at the end of the year. What? Oh my God. The rich get richer. That's going to be
unfair.
Watching Menoncello and Dupont link up together, he's just playing out of his skin. The line for the first try, the tackle bust. Now, Elliot Daly won't like watching either of the replays back, but he was just absolutely unbelievable. What a day for Italian rugby, Luke.
Unbelievable. Look, delivering on the expectation. I think lots of people were calling that win. And I just wondered, would they be able to mentally get themselves in a position to deliver? And wow, did they deliver? It was magic. And I think, look, the good thing is that they've kind of been consistent. They caused Ireland serious trouble. Really, they caused. And you think about the impact he had. I mean, the try that was pulled back, that was a magic bit of play for that as well. He's been doing it consistently. As you say, the rich get richer with Toulouse picking him up. He looks like a serious bit of business. Great looking athlete, isn't he? He's got that top end pace. He's got the lateral movement. He's got the strength. He's got the ball handling too, lads. He's not he's the full bag of tricks. So he is a special bit of stuff. And look, the pack. I mean, they're just meaty. They're so good at the scrum. And they've got a little bit to them now in open play. It's not just a complete one-dimensional kind of pack that the Italians have had a few of those packs where you go, oh, they're pretty tricky in the at set piece time. But I think once we get if the game opens up, I think we can pick a few of these guys apart. Not sure that's there anymore. I think they look pretty gritty. They look good around the park. They look sensible. They've got a decent kicker. Yeah, bit of threat out wide. They look like a pretty complete team, and it's been a great coaching. They've done some great work on the coaching side, and as well to supplement that, I think they've got some pretty good under-20s teams, having come through as well over the last couple of years. So I think these guys are going to be competitive for a while, and this might be the new world we're kind of living in going forward, is that Italy are a real threat in this competition, and they will be able to deliver if they have a bit of expectation to beat a big team. So I think this weekend might be huge for them mentally. I know they've crossed a few thresholds this tournament already, in terms of wins, really big wins, but I think this would really cement a brilliant campaign, and I think, to me, this might be the most difficult one of the lot, maybe, is to kind of deliver this one.
Like, realistically, you're assuming they've been on the beer for a couple of days in Rome after beating England, which they'll be like that, you know.
On the wine.
Sorry, on the wine and the pasta.
None of that crap for the Italians.
Or a few Peronis, maybe. A few Peronis, perhaps. But I agree with you completely. Like, this Six Nations has changed my opinion of Italy so much. Like, I actually thought, in some ways, I was actually more impressed with their game in the Aviva than I was on Saturday. Like, on Saturday, they were really helped by some English kind of melting down, like a Toje's terrible yellow card. And whereas I thought they came to the Aviva and matched Ireland punch for punch and had Ireland kind of hanging on at the end even. I know Ireland broke up the pitch, but up to that point, like, you know, as you mentioned, the disallowed try, that was the moment where I thought it was like a grown-up performance. It wasn't like a smash and grab, Italy muddying it and getting out with a narrow defeat. They actually played really, really well, and they've built on that. And I thought they were, you know, I was delighted to see them get the win at the weekend, as you mentioned. Like, if you look at their different facets, like, they have a really good scrum, like, they have a really good threat out wide. They have a dynamic, kind of pretty powerful pack. Like, they have some good ball handlers in the pack. You know, Conan at number 8 is pretty dynamic. You know, Garbisi is pretty good at out half. He's not like ultra reliable, but he's a pretty good goal kicker. He can move the ball. Their centres, Menoncello, we mentioned Brex is a very good player as well. Brex had a great quote saying Menoncello is touched by God. He's like, some players are just touched by God, like, and this guy has it. So all of a sudden you're looking at Italy, and the under 20s point is a good one as well. Anyone who's watched their games with Ireland over the last 5-6 years, they've lost to them on occasion, but they've also barely got out with a couple of wins when Italy have played really well. So Cian, what's your view on how Italy have built and that great win on Saturday?
Yeah, they've got good foundations in place. I think they've got Steve Aboud back in there as well, a good Irishman who's a very shrewd operator. I think he went off to Canada, but he's back now. He's a really great reappointment for them. Yeah, like, the reason why this Six Nations has been one of the best and could be the best depending on what happens in Super Saturday this weekend is because Italy have been so competitive. Wales have now gotten more competitive as the competition has gone on, and there's been no sort of freebies. And like, Ireland survived a major scare against Italy that day, you're right, Will, and from what I gather, I think Italy got an apology from World Rugby that forward pass try should have been allowed. So that could have been a very, very different game. I'm already thinking of Ireland going to Rome next year. Like, that looks like a very different proposition than what it would have done over the years. I agree with you about Brex. I think there's no doubt that Menoncello is the star of this team. It's hard to believe he's still only 23 years old. But Brex is a brilliant foil for him in midfield. I think he allows him to do the sort of the magic moments. And yeah, it's absolutely brilliant for Italy. I'm glad you mentioned the back row. I'm a big fan of Zuliani. I think has been excellent, really good against Ireland. And Lamaro is such a brilliant captain. He's a real good figurehead. He speaks unbelievably good English, but it's the messages that he delivers in public as well are brilliant. And I think he's an awesome leader for this Italian team as well. So just brilliant for the competition. I think you're both right. Backing it up this weekend, a bit like I said about Ireland not quite being able to come down off the high of Twickenham and go back up again. I think that's going to be a big challenge for Scotland as well this week, lads, is once you get up to that high and the following week you're asked to go again, that is very, very difficult. And I think Wales growing in confidence, they'll have taken a lot from that Ireland game. So it's another big test for Italy, but I think it's fair to say no matter what happens in Cardiff this weekend, it's been a successful campaign for Italy, and no one can ever take away that first win over England.
Yeah, exactly.
And just to ally to that point as well, I think it's the reason I kind of say this is probably the most important one is that there is expectation, but it's away from home. You know what I mean? So like this is the next frontier for them, is that you deliver, like, because it is so difficult to win away from home, guys. Like in the Six Nations, you really have to put in a really good performance, I think, to do that. So I just think it's important to mention that's why, because everyone would have said last week, and I have a feeling I might have said it, this is huge for them to have some expectation at home against England. But this might be, the more I think about it, the more I think this might be more important for that reason. It's away from home, a big win, a good scalp away from home. I think they need to get this one done to just to build on the really strong foundation of the two wins, at Scotland and England. This would really cement them, in my opinion, as having come like a long way.
It would almost be kind of a business-like victory. Like it would be just one that you'd expect a good team of their stature to be able to achieve. Although I do really want Wales to win, even though I've loved the Italian journey, just because I think it would be great for Wales and where they've been at, and it would be a good reward for how they built into the campaign. And Cian, I think you're spot on about Lamaro. Like, how he speaks, and he's had been the captain for some tough days and had some tough moments himself, some bad yellow cards over the years. But interestingly, in the aftermath, he actually mentioned how because of the expectation, he actually felt there was a nervousness in the dressing room and there was a bit of quietness because they knew England were coming, England were faltering. This was the best chance they were going to have in quite a while, and to be fair, they delivered it. Unfortunately, we are actually out of time. Our GA colleagues are about to use the studio, so England are going to skate for the time being. They're not going to get the kicking that they probably deserve, but we're hoping to come back potentially later in the week with a second podcast, so you have that to look forward to. We might touch on England, we'll touch on the Ireland team announcement and all of that. That's all we have time for on today's episode of the Left Wing Podcast, so sponsored by Energia. Big thanks to Luke for joining me, to Cian for joining me, for all the people listening, and we will see you later in the week. Goodbye.